I'm super happy that so many of you are interested in learning about Figma with us today. During this webinar, mostly from the presentation, as you see, we're already using Figma until the mini demo examples I prepared for you. I'll be going through a Figma interface. We'll reveal what you can do with it, and from this basic feature to the most powerful ones. As a disclaimer, this is not, unfortunately for me and CareerFoundry, this is not a sponsored talk. So everything that you will hear in next hour is my own personal opinion from my personal usage, professional usage of the tool. So please take it with a grain of salt. It's really, you should also figure out what makes sense for you in your design teams as well. Okay, before we dive deep into Figma, let me tell a little bit about myself so you know who's talking here. I'm a UI design mentor at CareerFoundry over the last 4 years. I've been doing product design over the last nearly 10 years. And feel free to connect, Twitter, LinkedIn, also Instagram. My work experience since I moved to Berlin since 6 years now has been designing UI, UX, even user research, whatever is necessary to develop and design digital products. So I've been working at companies like Zalando, Holiday Pirates, and now at Corber, where we create products like this maintenance app, where you can see in this screen, where we're also building tech companies for AI-powered production, manufactured efficiency, and industrial IoT. Okay, then moving on, why actually are we talking about Figma? So if you enrolled in one of the CareerFoundry programs, particularly in the UI design program, you're probably familiar already with Sketch, Adobe, maybe even both. And as a designer, it's actually very important to have an overview of the industry's leading UI design tools. And the fact that you actually listen to this, to me, it already tells me that you already have the right growth mindset that is necessary to be a good product designer. So what you see here is a little bit of a result of the annual design tools survey. And this, even though there is a clear winner over the last year in pretty much every category, you see that actually Figma is really getting close to Sketch, even though it's a much recent tool. So therefore, let's look at actually each one of these categories. So the design tool survey is happening by the end of each year. And before, the results were much more scattered, and nowadays they're becoming much more uniform. So it's actually quite interesting. In terms of UI design, the responses for Figma grew close to two times, and you'll see that it's the second position on the graph right after Sketch, which has been in the market for many years now. And then in terms of prototyping, it's very close. Also, Sketch released the prototyping tool after Figma came up. So it's kind of interesting to see the competition going close to each other and influencing the features that are being developed on both apps. So you see that actually, in terms of prototyping, the usage grew more than 2 times. And you'll also see that InVision is gradually dropping, while Sketch is becoming stable, maybe even decreasing slightly, while Adobe XD slowly grows and Figma is actually exponentially growing. So I do believe that it's quite important to look into it for that reason. Also, in terms of developer handoff, there are tools that are very present in the market, and they are used in collaboration with Sketch. And Zeppelin is definitely the market leader, but then Figma is again getting pretty close to it. Same for design systems. So again, we see really big growth here. And the most interesting part is when you analyze that in terms of the size of the company and how many employees the company has. So for me, it's actually pretty clear that a company that has many employees is actually harder to change their processes and the tools that are implemented there. So the smaller the company, the easier it is to switch. So that for me, that kind of, I do see a trend here, which is slowly Figma getting over and overcoming Sketch in terms of popularity. Lastly, in terms of file management, we have many tools being used to keep files organized, while Figma, what it does is actually keeps the files in the cloud, because they are stored within the product itself. So you actually don't need to do anything about that, which is very convenient. We'll go through that in more detail later and see if you want to still store your files, you can still do it, obviously. Then lastly, when people were asked which tool are you most excited to try in the upcoming year, so in 2020, Figma was clearly the big winner. So I'm really happy to see so many people curious about it and willing to give it a try. So let's dive, and before we dive into the features and the interface and everything that you can do with it, let's see if there's any questions so far for us here and from the crowd. Not sure if this was too fast.
But I'm here. No questions from the crowd. There's one actually. Will the copy of the presentation be provided at the end? No, we won't be. Well, actually, yes, because Olga has a really exciting surprise for you. So I know just in about 5 minutes, you'll be able to actually jump into the presentation and explore Figma for yourself. So yes, the presentation will be shared with you. I have a question about Figma, Sketch, and Adobe XD. So a lot of our prospective students and students ask which one can be used on a Mac, which can be used on a PC. Obviously, not everyone is using a Mac computer.
Yeah.
I know Sketch is only software for Mac. Is Figma also available on PC?
Yes, it is. It also can be used on the browser, which means that probably even on Linux. I haven't tried, but reality is it is not platform specific like Sketch is. That's probably why it's also growing so quickly, perhaps with non-Mac users as well.
Fantastic, great. Yeah,
I do see some Q&A on prototyping. Yes, we'll cover, get into that very briefly, but we will cover that. And if it's still valid to learn Sketch, absolutely. The market still has a lot of companies using Sketch. Nevertheless, I would say that it's pretty similar. So the switch is not so complex. And reality is it's more about learning how to use the tool than actually the tool itself. And the adaptation for me took just like a couple of days switching from Sketch to Figma, which was pretty quick.
That's what I was going to say. I started using Sketch at the beginning, then I transformed to Adobe XD, and now I started experimenting with Figma. And you actually, knowing Sketch or even Photoshop and other tools, you can learn all these new tools super quickly. Cool. Thanks, Olga. I'll appear back in.
All right.
In a while. Thanks.
Let's move on. Let's start with the Figma interface. So we do have here the user interface, and you see the tools on the very top. Then you see the option to add pages. In this case, I only have one page, but maybe I'll want to create pages for separate things here. Then we have the layers, my layers, which are inside each one of these frames. And we'll cover that in the next slide. So basically, you do see the layers for each one of the slides here. As soon as I open it, and inside of each element, so the logo, the Figma logo vector, etc. And then you have assets and libraries. Pretty much very useful for creating components, which will also cover what they are soon. Reality is these are a little bit like elements that you can replicate. So as you see in my slides, you have the logo and this element repeated everywhere. So if I actually want to make it a change, I will make it in only one single place, which is in my first slide where I have the master component, and it will update right away everywhere. Just as an example, very quickly, boom, it's pretty much red everywhere now. So that's pretty convenient. So things like buttons, all the elements that are repeatable, you can actually move on and make quick changes right away. But yeah, then you can share these libraries with your team and have them synced across the whole company. Then, or your whole design team, for example. Then we have also the properties panel, which is context dependent. So what we have here is right now only the specs regarding the whole document, but if I select one of the elements, in this case, this frame, it will give me the options regarding this specific element. If I select the text, it will give me the options regarding the specific text, etc. Then moving on, we have the design prototype code version methods, not method modes, sorry. So in design, it's pretty obvious. We just use it like Sketch. In prototype, we can wire things together. So you see my presentation here. Actually, it comes from, I literally just wire screens together, but I could also link elements. So if I click on this specific element or on this specific button, then it will go to this screen. And then I can also define what kind of animation do I have? Is it instant? Is there some kind of move in motion? From which side does it move in? Maybe you also want to have a little bit of an overlay popping up. So for example, if you hover an element and you have a submenu popping up when you hover a specific link. So all of these, or a tooltip, for example, all these options are possible here. So feel free to explore them and try it out as well. Then we have the code mode. So you do have, when selecting an element, so in this case, we have this specific text, and we can clearly see, okay, which font we're using, what size it is, what's the line height, many elements appear here. So when you collaborate, this is a great tool for handoff, for example. Besides, you also have versioning. So if I unselect everything, I have this little drop down that tells me show version history. And I can literally just say, okay, who edited and when, and select one of these versions and see how it looked like in that specific time. Maybe also duplicate it. So for example, if I select this, I can literally just restore it or duplicate if I want to copy a specific element that I had in that by that time to my newest file. As you can imagine, this becomes pretty handy, particularly because most of the times there's several apps that you need to use in order to have all these features together, and that becomes quite pricey in the end as well. So it's quite convenient to have Figma and everything happening in one single place. Then we have options like sharing and exporting, obviously. So we do sometimes want to export specific elements. So maybe somebody asks for this logo. I just go into my export. I have the options here as standards in several sizes as well, and resolutions, as well as the option to share this file. So I can share my file. I can share also the presentation itself only, or not presentation, sorry, the prototype, which in my case is a presentation, but reality is it is a prototype. And I can just then ask people to look into that. And here you can also select if you want to add somebody as an editor or as a viewer, because I don't want maybe my PO to change my designs, or the developer will be moving things around while inspecting elements. And this way they also only have access to the code panel. So they don't really see the design and the prototype modes because they can't really change anything. Then, let me see if I forgot to mention something. Yeah, basically, you can also have customers commenting here. You have this option, and Jakob, feel free to share the link to this file. Maybe we will see some people commenting. So you can actually add comments and maybe have consider this something here, and then when I post this comment, even if I move this element around or even the artboard, the comment will still be linked to that element. In this case, it's not linked probably, but if I move my artboard, it will still be in the same place where it was actually put in the first place. So you'll see that's quite beneficial. And as you add people to your file, as people can actually get into, jump in, they can start commenting and adding. As I see some people jumping in already. And we can right away have comments and feedback very quickly in these files. I will quickly hide my multiplayer cursors so I don't see all of you hovering around, but feel free to play around here. Okay, then next we have components. As mentioned, you can create components and you can use them as children, or basically, so like an element that has these 4 elements is a master component. An element that has only one geometrical shape is a child of that component. And then I can actually have those elements in my assets library. So you can also create text naturally. You can create text styles, change those over here. One quick. So basically, when I have my text, I can actually create a bunch of text styles. So I can define that this specific text has a different style, and I can create, just give it a name. And then this style appears in my list over here, in theory. Let me see that happen. Something went wrong. Test, create style. Apparently it doesn't accept test. CareerFoundry. Oops. Let's see now. Yeah, something went wrong here. I don't really know why it doesn't appear. In theory, it should appear. If not, if maybe because I don't have all the permissions, because this is a sub account of one of my primary accounts, then in that case, I will simply just select my paragraph style or a headline style that I have defined for this text. Okay, then moving on, we have also color styles. It can be defined and you can switch them around. There's also some specific theme colors that appear when you log in. You can just ignore them as well. Basically, you do want to create your own colors and not really just take the ones randomly from Figma. Most likely you have your own product brand for that to pick the colors from. And then in order to create components, as mentioned before, you can just select an element and either click on this icon or press Command Option K, which it will be Control Alt K for Windows. Moving on, let's see how we combine and edit shapes. So first of all, we have frames and slices. And I see people starting adding comments, lovely. We do have this frame option. So as in any other tool, you have something like called an artboard normally, and that is the element that allows you to select a screen size. Maybe it's a phone, maybe it's a tablet, maybe it's a desktop size, whatever. And the cool part, if you select actually, in this case, for example, an iPhone 8, and then you go to your prototype, if you unselect everything, you go into your device and you can actually have the case of an iPhone 8, which looks pretty cool. You can actually see that popping up. Of course, my whole presentation is not broken, but you can have a really neat prototype that looks super professional. I will just undo so that we can go back to that presentation later. Okay, then after we create our frame, and that can be any size, obviously, you can also change the size in the design mode. And after that, we can also add elements to it. Yeah, you also have the slice option if you're familiar with Sketch for selecting areas so that you can have, you don't need to, you can crop things randomly without having, and then when you export them, you have them exactly with that element specifically. It's a little bit like a crop, but for export mostly. Then in terms of the elements that you can use. So you have these basic shapes like rectangle, ellipses, polygons, where you can actually define the number of sizes. If you press Shift, it becomes like an element with the same number of sizes. So in this case, I'm doing an hexagon, or I create a star, for example. But of course, I can also just pick a line and create maybe a user flow diagram with arrows. I normally just create the line or even just draw it with this pen tool. And then I'm pressing Shift to keep it straight. And then add the, let me just make this a little bit bigger so you can see it, and maybe use white. And then add the corners over here on the cap. So you can literally say, okay, in this element, which I have selected, I want a round, or I actually want a triangle arrow. And then there you go. You have a beautiful user flow diagram with an arrow pointing over some specifics that you want to add. Then, so you will see that there's a bunch of features that are a little bit kind of hidden in this section. So feel free to explore a lot of these things. Add a lot of value, and I see many designers that don't even realize that these elements exist here, which is pretty handy. Then next we'll have how to make pie charts, which is something that I really love about Figma. It's like the single tool where this is so easy. You simply create a circle, right? You do an oval or ellipsis here just by clicking O. And then when you select it, you have, with this selection pointer, you have a little circle here that you can actually open up and then define. So notice that while it's still a circle, there's absolutely no options here on the properties panel. So before, when it was a circle, there was no options. So there was only the option of the angle. But as soon as I select this arc, Figma understands that I want to create a pie and actually allows me to edit this with a lot of precision. Maybe I want to say that it's 55%. And maybe I want to make it as a, like not a full circle, but as a semicircle. And perhaps I want to change where it starts. Maybe I want to do something like this. Can even make the criterion logo, if you're familiar, very quickly. So this is really convenient. You don't need to do a lot of blending modes and many different weird things in order to create something really simple like this. Then we can look into masks and boolean groups. So it's pretty much the same as any other UI design tool. You can select an element like an image that you want to crop something out of, and you just hit this, use this mask. Because the rectangle is behind, Figma understands that's where my mask is. It will mask the element on top. It will pretty much mask everything that you have selected. You can just mask a bunch of elements altogether. So in this case, I can also use stars as masks, etc., maybe even profile images. So yeah, there's plenty of options. It definitely needs to be a closed object, as you know, but yeah, apart from that, it's pretty flexible. Then we have the blending mode. So as soon as you get two elements together, in this case, I will just ungroup them so you see how they look like originally. And this is my circle, this is my square with rounded corners over here. And all I did is just select these two and union selection. And the rest are the other options, which is the subtraction mode, the intersection, and the exclusion. So it removes where they overlap in this case. Then in terms of styles and layout in general, we do see very handy features like auto layout that came up after Sketch launched, which is also interesting. And you can see that, for example, this is a button, and if you have a different label, which is very common, you can just use a child of the component, and the button size will adapt to the size of the text. It will also adapt to the fact that if you maybe suddenly don't have this icon in the list, or this icon is also not there, you can just hide, and the whole element restretches, your whole UI adapts to it. The same with this text here. What if this tech error message doesn't have 2 lines or has more than 2 lines? And there's plenty of options for you to define how this element appears on the screen. So because this window has a center, it will pretty much be aligned in the center when I moved the outer element, but because also the element that I select has a different, so the element inside has a different property, it will align differently. If I resize, if everything else resizes, it will have different constraints, and the components will actually adjust in a different way. So it's very precise. You really need to be careful and be aware of what you're doing, but allows you to be really specific in how elements behave when there's more text, less text, etc. Same with all these constraints that you will see here. We will cover that in more detail soon. So basically, another element is the layout grid, and you see here the constraints. So if I select, if I resize the frame, it will actually not be resized because I told Figma that it will stay on the top and on the left. Well, if I wanted to resize, I will just say, okay, it's right and left, and then it goes together with it, and it's pretty handy. All right, that's it about the auto layouts and constraints. In terms of grids, which is something that is also very powerful, you can have more than one grid, which is already a big plus. You can have this 8-pixel grid for native applications for Android, for example. You can also have columns. So if you have your 12 columns with, I don't know, 24-pixel margin and 16-pixel gutter, as an example, you can then also add, for example, another frame in here that follows this grid, but has maybe a subset of elements. So imagine that I have my catalog that has some links on this corner, but then I still want to define another grid inside for the elements that I have here. So maybe there are some pictures or some products that I want to display, and I will change the color so that it's not so confusing. It will be a little bit ugly, but at least it's clear that we have maybe a 5-column because we have a set of 5 products put together. And this is quite neat. And then I'll just replicate, I'll use the same gutter size so that it's consistent. And that's about it. That's super simple. And all your UI elements will be adjusting to this grid. And then while you design, you can still use this grid. But then if you don't want to look at it all the time, you just hide it here. But it's still there. You can still enable it later and just go back to this element right away. So you will still have it in your layers, which also everybody can see, provided that it's visible, of course. Everybody in your file that you added to. So everyone that is in view mode should be able to see your layers that are enabled. If I have any hidden layers, they will be not shown to the viewers. They will only be shown to editors. All right, then we have also really neat automation. Like if I want to rearrange this element, notice that what it does is pushes all the other elements to the side. So it actually moves the elements around very quickly. And what I just did that by selecting all of them and switching into this circle and moving them around. So basically what I'm telling Figma is like I switch these 2 elements in location. This can be pretty handy if I finally decide that, okay, my menu doesn't have this order, has a little bit of a different order. It's much easier, right? You don't need to realign things back again. They're already aligned, so you don't need to do it over and over again. Spend time with it. So maybe here, maybe I decide, no, I don't like this composition. There's some kind of white image in between two blacks. Maybe I want a little bit more nicer transition. And it's pretty quick to switch. Lastly, you can also use the margin between the elements, if provided that they're already aligned. And if you're a good designer, you have all your elements properly aligned. And you can also then just either change it here with more precision, the space, the horizontal space, maybe I want, I don't know, 60. And you have the vertical space, which maybe is 30, for example. So yeah, that's it for rearranging elements. Then we also have things like fills and strokes. And before that, actually, if you're not, no, actually, we'll cover that later, sorry. We also have fills and strokes. And here we do, it's very typical. We have the not normal fill, the size of this, the thickness of the stroke, if it's inside, outside, centered. But then we also have some effects with, for example, maybe you want to add some drop shadow to your element. I'll emphasize this a little bit so it's more prominent. Maybe I want to have 16 by 24 and like a really wide blur. And notice that again, you can just show and hide things and see how that looks like yourself. The other cool thing is this effect of background blur, which can be pretty handy when you're designing iOS native applications, which have the top and the bottom navigation bars with semi-transparency, right? They have this, like when the text goes beyond, there's something visible. You can still see the content passing through them. And you need to have your fills to at least to have some sort of opacity. I'll just reduce a little bit more and zoom in so you can see what I'm doing here. So I'm reducing the opacity and I already applied some blur, but I will intensify this. So you'll see the effect. Now it might be a little bit too much. Maybe I'll do 12 or 4. 4 was not enough. But yeah, this is a little bit the effect that you see in the iOS native that can be pretty nice, neatly organized here and reproduced pretty effectively. Then I will probably stop here. I find that I might be going a little bit too quickly. So let's stop for a few questions and before we dive into the super cool and awesome Figma features that I love.
Great. Thanks so much, Olga. There are actually quite a few questions about a couple of the features that you presented. So Miles is asking, how do you change the number of sides on the polygon? Could you quickly just go back to that slide and so we can go through it again?
Gladly. Okay, so we do have the polygon over here. It's this element here. So as soon as you add, I will add a new polygon just in case. When you add, it usually adds a triangle, and here it says 3. And then you just add, okay, I want 8. Okay, now it's gray on gray, you can't really see it. It's this element over here. I hope that is what the question was about.
Yeah, I think so. And so basically in the toolkit on your...
In the properties panel, you just need to have the element selected. So Figma always needs to know what elements you're referring to. I didn't even realize that you could do radius to the corners right here. Actually, you can also use this, as you see.
Oh, nice.
I'm discovering things myself just by dragging things here.
That's the thing about these tools. There's no one proper way of doing things, you know, like every time I'm watching a tutorial, there's like another way of, I don't know, doing a mask or drawing and stuff. Mm-hmm. Really, really cool. the feature I really loved was the pie chart ellipse. Yeah, and there are actually a couple of questions about that. How do we put many elements in a pie chart? So I guess if it's I
will rotate it. I will duplicate this element. So I'm just pressing Option and dragging the element to duplicate it. And then I will just rotate this. Maybe here I want to say, okay, this element starts here and it has only this percentage.
Okay.
Of course, these elements need to align, ideally. Yeah. So something like this. So if this is, I don't know, 8%, I would assume that this would start. I need to do some math here, which I'm not really good at, but yeah.
Maybe not the right time for that. But yeah, basically the feature works. You just need to duplicate, kind of create another,
exactly.
Another shape.
So, as a normal pie chart, you will want to have different elements put together. Oops, like this.
Great.
Go ahead. I'll keep doing pie charts.
The next question is about masks. And actually, I admit myself, I always find it confusing. Do you put a shape behind or in front of the mask?
Yeah, honestly, it might be different depending on the tool. So you might as well just do this and see, okay, this didn't work. Or no, basically, if I undo my mask first and then group these. If I put my rectangle first and it doesn't work, you basically see what it does, right? I click and it realizes, okay, it's the image that is being used as mask. So I'll just do Control-Z, I'll put my rectangle back and I'll use this as a mask. But yeah, probably depending on the tool, each tool will have its own way, and then you just figure out how it works and then you just repeat for all the other elements.
Yeah, that's how I do it. Just try it all. Then we have a question about the auto layout and the button. Mm-hmm. Could you just go back to that slide and show us again how did you activate the auto?
Good point. Layout? I think so. I didn't mention that. Thank you for that reminder. Basically, you do have the auto layout option here, so you have to have a text in the background in the first place, and then the background is added to, or at least a frame with the text inside. And then the auto layout is added. When the auto layout is added, usually your background disappears and it's turned into this option. You can remove it here, and then it just puts it back into being a frame. Or I can just add auto layout, and then I define, okay, what do I want to happen? Do I want auto hide, like in this case of this pop-up, or I want the hide to be fixed, like in the case of a button? Then if it's horizontal, the same for vertical, obviously. Maybe I want the elements to have, like, for example, in this icons that have several, like the button case is very simple. It has only the text inside. But in the case of the icons where several icons inside, you might want to specify what's the distance between the elements, what's the distance from the top and from the sides, as well if it's horizontal or vertical, as you see here. It will vary quite widely. Then you can nest auto layouts inside auto layouts. So in this case, you have the full window together with the buttons, and inside the buttons you have, each button has auto layout too, so that they can resize. So, and now I don't have space. Something like this.
And to create a button like this in the first place, do you just incorporate a shape with some text?
Yeah, exactly. So you do need to kind of creatively think. Maybe some things will not work fully as you want if it's getting too complex. Perhaps, like in my case, where I was designing some, I can try to recreate that very quickly, where I had a bit of an icon in one corner here, and then this icon, imagine that this would have an icon nested, and that icon would be like a success message or an error message. And next to that, I would have a message, which has a white background. But then below it, it had a line which was red, continuing this error message. And then had some text and has an X button to close it. And this got a little bit messy in the sense that autolay didn't really work, because then the text would not really scale, and it would not increase the box. So there was a lot of limitations there. So not everything will work, you will see, but you can try it out. There's a lot of things that it works, and especially for very base cases like models, which are common component elements, it's typical, and it works pretty well, as you see here.
And the icons that we can see on the slide, is it something you created yourself? Or
no, this is from Figma tutorials. They basically, when they release new versions, they say, hey, we have this thing now, and you can actually access their files and even use the components, as I did here.
Perfect. Nice. So I think that's it in terms of questions about the content of the presentation, but there was one question about working in different tools, basically. So is it possible to take screens created in Adobe XD or Sketch and put them into Figma?
You can import Sketch files right away, so provided that they don't have components themselves, or not. So if you add a Sketch file that has already built-in components, it will be a little bit messy. So my suggestion would just remove the components, make everything non-component, and then just drop the Figma. You can just import it here. Literally just drag it inside your application.
Great. And maybe do you have any advice about companies that have restrictions against using cloud, since Figma is a cloud-based tool? What could be an alternative?
I mean, I didn't really read the terms and conditions, what they say. So far, I've seen so many companies switching to Figma that it's hard for me to believe that there are any issues there. Particularly if you pay for Figma, your files are actually private. So if you have a free version, everybody can access this through a link, at least if you have this share option. Maybe actually you could still disable only people invited to this file, but you cannot have the option to have private files, as far as I understand. And in the paid version, you can actually have everything, like just invite collaborators and nobody can access your files. Maybe I'm actually wrong, and this option will allow I think you will just be shown a 404 page if you try to access, if I switch this here.
Great, that's it for now, and I'll be back a tiny bit later.
Thanks you, Jakob. See you soon. All right, then let's move with all the cool features that make it super powerful. And one of them is autosave. And this is the cool thing when you switch from any other tool, is you keep pressing Command S, and it just reminds you that actually Figma does it for you and gives you a nice emoji to remind to be a little bit different every time. So yeah, don't need to do it, and don't spend your time clicking on Command S, because we do that for you. And that's why versioning also works pretty handy there. Then you have also the automation in terms of in the prototype itself. So as you've seen through this presentation, there are some animations that simply work, as you see here, because the names of the layers are exactly the same. So if I have this element here, which has the same layer name with this element here, provided that they have one single style. Like, of course, if you have different text sizes inside one single line, it might be a little bit complicated for Figma to handle. But if it's a simple element that just moves or scales or changes colors, it's really easy, and you don't need to do anything except for when on prototype mode. select the element you want to animate and select Smart Animate, and then just define the ease and milliseconds, and then Figma does everything for you. It's super powerful for quick animations and easy ones that then you will not need to switch to another tools to showcase those kind of things. Then I think we already mentioned version history before, so that's another handy feature. Then you have the tidy up. So in case you're not very tidy and you need this option to align the elements that appear, you can just go to your object, if I'm not mistaken. No, arrange and tidy up. I don't think you can see this because it's above the screen. I'm sharing. I'm not sure you can see that. But basically, if you go to Figma main menu, if you go to arrange, then the option tidy up appears, and it magically puts the elements in the right place. Or doesn't. It never works when you want it to work. Okay, now it worked. I somehow had this element on top. I'll do this again. I'll just select the elements, so click arrange and click tidy up, and it's magically put into place, and now you can rearrange them back again. Okay, then ultimately it's a web-based tool, as we mentioned. It's just super powerful because then you don't need people to download files, you don't need people to download prototypes. They just open a link and they can access the elements right away. As you've seen here, we have plenty of people around, and it's very handy. So reality is there's no need to manage files because of that. There's no need to, if you want, you can still go to file and save as .fig and keep that file in your computer, but it's completely useless in my opinion. I just keep all my files here, even if I run out of internet, provided that I just shut down my computer and then open it again using a desktop app. I do have still access to the same files that were still open from the previous day, and I just continue working. Even if I run out of internet, it will sync and save as soon as I get internet back, and it's that simple. Okay, then we have also the constraints. We already spoke before. So if I define that this element being in the center, as soon as I readjust, it will be always in the center. If I define that this element is on the top, as soon as I change the height, it will be on the top. If I define that this element will be on the bottom, like in a main navigation, as soon as I readjust, or maybe that doesn't need to be completely on the bottom. It just will count the amount of pixel that is from the bottom and will keep that same size, which is cool. And yeah, that's about it in terms of designing responsive websites and applications, because that then simplifies your life. You can just duplicate the window and resize it, and then it will adjust to the right size. We do have also really cool plugins, and you don't need to go to the internet and search for plugins because they're all here. You just go to your plugins tab, and you browse through all plugins. And the first one is one of my favorites, Unsplash, to add any photo that is free to your designs. And there's plenty of plugins here. If you pay as an organization, you can also add your own plugins and ask your developers to create their own plugins. But yeah, the ones that are here, there are already a lot of them, and they're really good. For example, we can just do the demo. You just go into your... So I installed the Unsplash plugin there on that previous screen where we were, and then I just go here to my menu, and I run Unsplash. And then I can either randomly select, or I can just search for nature photos. And then I can say, cool, I want to use this one. And then just, of course, I need to select the element, so Figma will not guess where I want to put it. But that's it. Then I just close this window, and I have a beautiful photo here right away. Yeah, again, if you want to have more than one window open at a time, you can easily do that. Just go to File, New Window, and you will also be able to maybe look into screen size with the full view and then work only on this particular very zoomed level. It really depends on how you work, but in reality it allows for many possibilities. And the cool thing of that, it will also show your avatar here, which will also allow you to talk and look into what you're doing yourself. So this is pretty handy when it comes in simultaneous collaboration. A lot of times I'm just having a call with a colleague with whom I'm working, and I literally just say, okay, I'm following you. And I click on that person's face, and I can check what that person is looking at and where they are at specific times. So, for example, maybe I can follow Carmina and see what she's doing with the layout grid work at this point. And maybe she's walking me through the last work that she was doing. And there's no screen sharing, literally, because you just can look into it directly in Figma, and you don't have any pixelation or any issues. You can at the same time collaborate. As I said, I hid the multiplayer cursors so they would not distract me, but then I can see all the cursors here. And I can see people working at the same time. In this case, of course, I don't give you edit access so that you don't delete the screens that I still haven't presented. But we could be simultaneously working at the same time in one file. Without having to think about versioning and merge conflicts and things like this. So as you see, it's really, really powerful. And it's the only tool so far that allows it. So yeah, I will basically now move on to like, this is basically everything that I wanted to share about Figma. And happy to still have some minutes for questions. If you want to actually explore Figma yourself, and feel free to also register for CareerFoundry UI Design Program. You will get to know more about Sketch and Adobe, have the opportunity to have really detailed instructions there, but you can obviously also use Figma and try it out in the course as well. And if you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn for a 5% referral code before you subscribe. Thank you so much for joining and staying with us until now. I'm happy to say that there will be another webinar next week already from CareerFoundry. If you want to register, I think you have the link in the chat. And let's open for the last Q&A of today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Olga. I really like what you said about just trying different tools, basically. So you can download Sketch, you can download this Adobe XD, you can download Figma, and just try them all and see what works best for you. So we have quite a few questions. First one I can see is from Esther, and Esther is asking, what are some of your plugins you recommend for best workflow?
A good one. I was literally preparing for that right before the webinar started. You saw me. I did so this is a new account that I created just for this webinar, but I did install a few of the my favorite ones is definitely Unsplash. Let me just go here. Then we have HTML to Figma. So you can, in case you're working on an existing website, you can literally just copy paste a link with using this plugin. And then that will immediately give you, it will render you this website in Figma with the specific elements, with the text, with everything. It's really powerful. It might have some issues and not everything will be perfect, but it's much better than replicating everything. Then you just need to adjust some elements. Even the cookie message comes with it. So yeah. Then we have Humans, which is a pretty cool illustration. I think it's like an open source illustration. And here you can just assemble people and change their jacket sizes, not sizes, sorry, colors. And change the elements, where they are, if they're seated, if they're walking, change their hairstyle. You can just rearrange all of this on your own. It's pretty cool. More things that could be handy. Figmotion, that was pretty much for a little bit more advanced animation, something that that is a little bit more complex and you can't achieve with auto animate. Feel free to use Figmotion there. In that case, it's a little, at least it was a little bit clunky when I tried it more than 6 months ago. So basically in September last year. It could be that it was a little bit better right now, but honestly, since auto animate launched, I never used it ever again. So it's pretty handy to have the auto animate feature. Thank you, Figma, for that.
There are quite a few questions about how stable is the browser version, and if you recommend downloading it to your computer.
I mean, if you're using it as a designer, I would totally go straight for the desktop version right away. If you have to tweak something really quickly, you can also just do it on the browser. I mean, my computer my fan starts burning right away as soon as I load too many tabs, and that's very common. So I'd rather not overheat my device.
And there's a question about the handoff to the developers. Do developers need a Figma account in order to get the files?
Everybody can access it anonymously if you want your files to be public, but if you want your files to be private, as normally in organization work, they will register, but then you will just invite them as viewers and not editors. You can also invite people to one specific file only. So here in the share, you can just invite it straight to the file itself, or you can add them to a team or organization over here. So here I have the option to invite members, and in the free version, I think you can have up to 2 members. So it can be you and your peer designer working in something together.
Great. This might be conversation for another webinar, but could you briefly talk to us about creating styles and how to save styles so you can reuse them later, for example, for a button or maybe text style?
Let me create a new file. I think that would be, because before I was having issues with my text and colors. So imagine that I have a specific text that has, I don't know, Roboto bold, and this is my headline 1. I will set it as 24 pixels, and here I just say, okay, text styles, add this as headline. Create style. Let's see if Figma doesn't work. Okay, now it worked. And you see that right away it appears here, local styles, text styles here, but I didn't create any color styles yet, so they don't show. Also, if I want to change those styles, I can just go here, select this element, and here I can click on this edit feature that then allows me to define more things and all the other options that you have here as well. Don't forget to click on the 3 dots because there's a lot of things hidden behind it that are very powerful. And then on the colors, so I'll just create a rectangle square here. I'll select, maybe I will select my own color because I want to, some teal. And then I can just add it. Oops, sorry, now I just added a second. As you see, you can also add multiple fills, and if you create a style with that, it will also be in the style. But in this case, I want just one color, and this will be my primary. And then it appears here, color styles. And then I have another color. I will just break it. I will change to another color. Maybe this is my error color. Too bright. Yeah, now you don't want the designer to be showcasing things, creating colors, because I will be spending time defining the color instead of explaining how it works. Okay, now you see that we have some local styles with one headline, 2 color styles. We can change them. Maybe this color changed, and then you publish it, right? You want to go here and go to your library and say, this current file, I actually want to publish in my team. And probably I can't because I'm not in a paint mode. But I can at least have a design system that I can change the colors, that I can enable or disable, so that I can actually not have it in this file. And then it won't annoy me anymore as it was before, like it was down here as you saw before. But yeah, if you have a paid account, then you will be able to actually publish this. It's pretty powerful, and all your teammates can use it later. Ideally, you also want to change your style, so it's not called Untitled, but it's called sample, for example. Is this? I hope this was enough. If you want to go into more detail.
Yeah. Thank you. As I I mean, I think it's a bigger conversation, but yeah, this example is great. That's all what we have time for today. Thanks so much, Olga. My biggest takeaway from this is that Figma is a very powerful and cool tool. I love the fact that it works on both Mac and PC, so you don't need to be buying a $1,000 machine just to run a piece of software. That's fantastic. Autosave is another great function that I'll definitely use. I lost so many files because Sketch doesn't have autosave option. And the collaboration option is also fantastic and useful. As I said at the beginning of the webinar, we'll be sending a follow-up email with a few resources and links to our future webinars, so please make sure you check that out. We also will be publishing the recording of the webinar in a few hours, so you can rewatch it at your own convenience. I think Olga decided to leave us, but that's the perfect timing because we're gonna finish the webinar. So yeah, thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you soon.